We had started with classful addressing. So we saw this classful addressing in the previous class where IPv4 addresses are divided into some classes, and you can see those classes here A, B, C, D, E, right? So each class, it's like this. They have, each class is assigned a group of IP addresses which could be assigned to organizations according to their size. Okay, like class A address will have the largest number of IP addresses as you can see over here, then class B, then class C. So the range is like this 1.0.0.12. This address belongs to class A, that is all IP addresses within this range will belong to class A. Then class B, this is the range, class B, this is the range, and D and E. What is important is we had also discussed the problem with classful addressing, that is each class is divided into a fixed number of blocks with each block having a fixed size. Now if you just see it on the larger scale, you will be able to figure out that uh, I'm not using my tablet today. Normally we have how many bits? We have 2 bits, right? And those are what? 0 and 1. And 32 bits, considering 32 bits are used to represent IP addresses. How many total combinations, how many total addresses will we have? 2 raised to the power 32, which is around 4 billion plus addresses. Now, what was done in the beginning, if these 4 billion addresses were not, if they had they not been divided into classes, it would have been sufficient to include all the devices of the world. But what they did something wrong, and that was they divided it into classes. And in each class, some of the addresses were wasted. So you can see here, each class is divided into a fixed number of blocks. You can see, and each block has a fixed size. Like number of blocks in class A is 128, and each block will have how many addresses? Around 16 million plus addresses in each block. So generally, you can understand that class A addresses are to be assigned to very large organizations like MNCs, large college campuses, okay, large buildings, so large companies, large corporate houses. So any organization which is that large, they would be assigned class A addresses. That is, they would be assigned one block, and within that one block, they can use around 16 million plus IP addresses. To be 16 million plus IP addresses means they could connect 16 million plus hosts to the network. They can create a network using 16 million plus addresses. But none of the organizations, if they checked it later, none of the organizations surpassed this number, or not even were close to this number, because none of the organizations have that many hosts. So what happened if one if one block is assigned to any one organization, the rest of the some of the IP addresses will be used, but what about the rest of the IP addresses? They were wasted. Okay, so there is wastage, and then just imagine if 128 blocks are given to 128 organizations, every block, some of the addresses will be wasted. Okay, in fact, more than half, 50% of the addresses were wasted. Then such wastage was there in each of the classes. So what happened? Those addresses, they couldn't be used because the already existing structure, it is very difficult to break the existing structure, because all protocols were already designed according to that. All technologies were already designed according to that. Now breaking that structure will mean again designing everything from scratch. So designers, engineers, they couldn't touch these classful addressing. They couldn't touch IPv4. So hence, now because nowadays you can see that there is a sudden boom in internet, not in this year, but in all the previous years. So because of that, what happened? Number of hosts are still increasing, and this IPv4 classes, they are not sufficient to suffice. They are not sufficient to handle all the hosts. That's why they have shifted to another better form of IP addressing, and that is IPv6. So IPv6 it actually uses 128 bits to represent 128 bits to represent one address. So you can just imagine 2 raised to the power 128 will be how much? It would be a huge quantity which would be sufficient for handling all the hosts of the world. So you might have checked it that whenever you check your internet configuration, you are provided both. You are provided an IPv4 address plus an IPv6 address. Both are provided by your ISP, that is Internet Service Provider. Why? Because IPv4 is for, you might think that if IPv4 is not sufficient, why IPv6? Sometimes what is happening, they are providing IPv4 once. Now you already know that IP addresses are auto-generated every time, dynamically assigned. So they are reusing IPv4 addresses. Like it's just like your cell phone number. One of the subscribers stops working, it is assigned to the other. So whatever is left out, they are just using that IPv4 because many of the systems, many of the servers, they are not compatible with IPv6. So for purposes of compatibility, IPv4 is still in use, but IPv6 address is also provided to you, which is the actual IP address of your computer, right? So this is the reason. Then use of each, now class A addresses were designed for large organizations, as I said, with a large number of attached hosts or routers. Then a little less class B for mid-size organizations with tens of thousands of attached hosts or routers. Class C addresses were designed for small organizations. So this is what you have to just pay attention over here. That is, here it is large organizations, here it is mid-size organizations, here it is small organizations. Class D addresses were designed for multicasting. Now this is something of, it is a kind of, I'll just tell you how it works. Multicasting means there are three things: unicast, multicast, and broadcast. What is unicast? Unicast means one-to-one communication. That is, there is one system, there are two systems, and one system wants to send any information or message to any other system. Let us understand this by an example. So suppose we have one system over here, and we have a few systems this side. My drawing will be crooked over here because I'm using the mouse. Another one over here. So if suppose, and we have a hub or a switch over here, normally represented by this symbol. So all are connected like this. So now this is system 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, and this is 5. So system 1 wants to send any information to system 3. System 1 wants to send any data to system 3. So it will send it to the switch and the switch will forward it to 3. So this is one-to-one communication, right? Now, one is broadcast, that is you send the data, system 1 sends the data to the switch or the hub and it broadcasts the data to all the systems. Switch doesn't broadcast, but hub does broadcast the data packets to all the systems, right? So when that happens, this is known as broadcast. And multicast is something which is between unicast and broadcast. Multicast means communication from one host to more than one host. That means communication will take place from this host to not one host but more than one host, but not all the hosts. That is, it should be something like communication to maybe some selected hosts in this group, which are enabled for multicast communication, which are enabled for listening to the host. Okay, so multicast means sending data or communication between from one device, that is one to many device. It's not one to all, one to many. So in short, it would mean that if I have unicast means one to one. If I have multicast, it means one to many. And if I have broadcast, it would mean one to all. Right? So this is the difference between the three. So here also you can see that class D addresses, they were designed for multicasting. Rest all the three A, B, C were designed for unicast, one system to other. Okay, and class D was designed for multicasting. Each address in this class is used to define one group of hosts on the internet. The internet authorities wrongly predicted a need for these many groups. This never happened and many addresses were wasted here too. And lastly, class E addresses were reserved for future use. Only a few were used, resulting in another waste of addresses. The flaw in this design. In block A, a block in class A address is too large for any organization, as I said. So most of the addresses in class A were wasted and were not used. Block B, again probably too large for any organization. And block C, too small for many organizations. You can just see it at a glance over here. This is unicast, you can see one to one. This is multicast, one to many, and this is broadcast, that is one to all. Understood? Of the 5 address classes, 3 classes ABC were designated for unicast, that is single source to single destination communication. Addresses in class D were reserved for IP multicast application, which allows one-to-many communication. Class E addresses were reserved for experimental purposes. Then came IPv6. The need for more addresses in addition to other concerns about the IP layer motivated a new design of the IP layer called the new generation of IP or IPv6. In this version, Internet uses 128-bit addresses that give much greater flexibility in address allocation, and there is no addressing here. These addresses are referred as IPv6 addresses and they contain 16 bytes, that is 16 octets, and it looks like this. So this is how it is referred, and I'll just show it to you also. So I'll right click on this, I'll go to properties, and here you can see IP version 4. This is IPv4, and right now my system has been set to obtain IP address automatically, and IP version 6 you can see over here, it is also set for getting automatically, right? Now how TCP IP works I have already told you, but we have to also understand that TCP IP is a multi-layered protocol structure. So you can see there are various layers of IP. At the bottom, you have the physical layer, which actually handles the transmission of data in the form of a stream of bytes. Next, you have the data link layer, which works with the MAC addresses, that is source MAC address, destination address, and here we have the hop-to-hop communication or hop-to-hop delivery. Then you have network layer, where you have source address, IP address. So here we have the router, that is the router is at work over here, which is actually source to destination. delivery, and then you have transport layer where the TCP protocol works, and here we have process to process delivery, and at the end we have application layer, which is the one which is closer to the to us users. Okay, and because it is closer to us, that is why we can perform anything, whatever we see over here, whatever protocols we use, whatever applications we use to send messages, that comes under application layer. So the higher layer disassembles message content into small data packets, and these data packets, they get added with some information at each layer, and then it is sent to the destination. At the destination, the data again enters from the bottom layer, and at each layer, each of those extra data or extra information which is added to each of the data packets, it is just taken out. Okay. TCP IP and higher level applications. Many higher level apps that e-commerce businesses need to be familiar with, utilize and or are built on TCP like FTP, HTTP, Telnet and SMTP. So FTP is file transfer protocol, HTTP is hypertext transfer protocol, Telnet is, we already know, it is uh, virtual, you can say it's kind of a remote login protocol where we can remotely log in into any computer, and SMTP is simple mail transfer protocol which is used for sending emails only. Now, what is FTP? File transfer protocol. It is clear through this diagram that it is used for uploading and downloading files. So, one of the standard internet protocols used to transfer data files between a client, that is, you will have an FTP client software on your computer, and there would be a server, FTP server software in the server. Okay, and through the computer network, through the internet, you can easily perform uploads and downloads. So it was developed in the early 1970s by Abhay Bhushan, alumni IIT Kanpur, while he was a student of MIT. FTP initially created to allow for the secure transfer of files between servers and host computers over the ARPANET network control program, a precursor to the modern internet. So it was initially created to allow for secure transfer of files between servers and host computers over ARPANET network control program. So when ARPANET was created, at that time FTP was used for securely transferring data. Then we have, nowadays it is being used for uploading files on web server as non-anonymous FTP. Okay, so you can see there are two types of FTP. I'll just explain that to you. One is anonymous FTP and one is non-anonymous FTP. So anonymous FTP means you can work without login as guest. That is, you don't need to log in into that server. You can easily get into the server as guest and you can upload or download files. But normally anonymous FTP is used only exclusively for downloads. Okay, but non-anonymous FTP requires a login and hence it is safe for uploads. If anybody wants to upload anything, why is it done? Because if suppose somebody uploads anything, any malicious content, okay, there would be no way to track the person if he has logged in through anonymous FTP. Hence, anonymous FTPs are specific only there for download. If you want to download, that is okay, and uploads, for uploads normally non-anonymous FTP is used, right? And there could be some of the servers which allow only non-anonymous FTP, that is for downloads and uploads both you need a login, and some provide anonymous FTP both uploads and downloads also. So this is FTP and it is available in two modes, text and GUI mode. And you can just see over here, we have certain things. This is the FTP client, this is the FTP server, right? You can upload or download files. So there are two channels. One is the data channel, which actually carries the data in the form of a stream of bytes. And we have a control channel which says what to do, whether uploading has to be done or downloading has to be done, or it also handles these things. Login, okay, FTP commands. There are various commands which are there. So those commands, browse directory, authentication, show directory, port assignment, all these come under, they are, all this information is carried by the control channel, and data is carried by the data channel. And you can also see over here, we have a desktop PC, we have a mobile phone, we have an FTP server. Upload, so data passes through the router, goes through the internet, saved, uploaded to server, and again it is downloaded, the data is downloaded back to your mobile phone. So this is how you can upload also and download also. Next is point to point protocol, PPP. So today millions of internet users who need to connect their home computers, they use PPP. Majority of these users have a traditional modem. They are connected to the internet through a telephone line which provides services at the physical level. But to control and manage the transfer, you need a point-to-point protocol at the data link layer, that is for hop-to-hop delivery, which I had explained to you earlier. Data link layer of TCP protocol suite handles hop-to-hop delivery of packets, right? That is from one host to the other host, one node to the other intermediate node, right? And to handle this transfer of data at the data link layer, the PPP is used. It defines how two devices can negotiate the establishment of the link and the exchange of data. It defines how two devices can authenticate each other, that is verify that each of them is an authenticated user. Next is HTTP Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which you have already studied. Students, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Now it is
There
audible.
is see, I'm at school right now, as you can see, and I'm using the school's Wi-Fi, and the school's Wi-Fi is like, bas kaam chalau hai. I'm not, I cannot rely fully on that, and my right now my mobile hotspot is also not working. So we have to, I'll just switch off my camera, so that would give us a little more data. Okay, so what I was saying is, we were talking about hypertext transfer protocol, that is HTTP. You already know that this protocol is used for transferring hypertext, that is text with non-linear navigational properties. Hypertext means text non-linear in nature and has navigational properties, means it can navigate through the internet, it can be used for jumping or moving or browsing to other websites or web pages. So that is the reason why it is known as hypertext, and hypertext is basically used for all communications between your computer, which is the client, and the uh, server, and the web server, where the information is stored in the form of websites, which is a collection of web pages, and web pages are a collection of hypertext, right? So HTTP functions as a combination of FTP and SMTP, that is, it functions as a combination of file transfer protocol. FTP is file transfer protocol, as we have already seen, and SMTP is simple mail transfer protocol. Right. So simple mail, it acts as a combination. By using HTTP, you can not only upload and download files, but you can also send and receive emails, right? So that's why it functions as a combination. It is similar to FTP because it transfers files and uses the services of TCP. As I already said, all these protocols are based on TCP only, and they work at the application layer of TCP. That is at the topmost layer. There is no separate control connection, only data is transferred between client and server. So you can see there are two versions of HTTP. One is HTTP and one is HTTPS, which is normally used these days. Only difference between the two is in HTTP, data is sent as plain text. It could be easily intercepted by a third party, whereas HTTPS is a secure version of HTTP where data is encrypted and sent to the server, or the communication takes place in an encrypted form. That is, even if somebody intercepts the data, he won't be able to understand what the data is. HTTP messages are not destined to be read by humans. They are read and interpreted by HTTP server and the client, that is the browser. The HTML which you use, hypertext markup language, you code it in using what? Tags and elements, tags, attributes. You remember HTML, okay? So you use tags and attributes, and these are interpreted by the browser, whichever browser you are using, whether Google Chrome, Opera GX, Mozilla Firefox. So browser is the client application which interprets the data, and server also has its own software which interprets the data. So your client will send a request to the server, and the server will respond to the request in the form of an HTML page. Some HTTP request types to server. How can a client, how can a client computer or a client, or we say HTTP client, that is your computer or your smartphone, it communicate with the server? There are various methods which it uses. Get and post is very important. Mostly it is used by web developers when they are actually creating server side pages to get send and receive. Like for example, I'll give you an information. Get method means request a document from the server. For example, like you visited a bank and you want your account, you want to know your account balance, right? So they are using a client server architecture where all the data is saved in the on the server, and all the employees are using the clients. So what happens is, the one of the employees, the data entry operator or the bank employee, enters the keys in your account number, which is passed to the server with the help of post. That is, send some information from clients to server. Post के through वो कहाँ जाएगा? Using the post method, the account number will be sent to the server, and then server is going to interpret that. It is going to first retrieve all the information about the information asked by the client. It will first extract all that from its database, and it will prepare an HTML page or a PHP page or server side scripted page, and through the get method it will pass it back to the client, right? So get means request a document from the server. This document could be anything. It could be a file, it could be an HTML page, anything. Next is head, requests information about a document but not the document itself. That is, people have already studied in HTML that we have two sections in an HTML web page. One is the head section and one is the body, if you remember. What does the body section contain? It contains all the content, your images, your text, your videos, GIF images, anything whichever you want to show it to the audience, show it to the people, that is contained in the body section. But information about that web page is contained in the head section. Like what all things? Head section contains what? So it contains title of the web page that you might have seen using with, if you type anything within the title tags, it appears in the title bar of the browser. Then you have some linking information. You have meta information. Meta information means data information about the web page which you are using, its version, okay, version of HTML which you are using. Then something about encoding, any encoding info, like which type of encoding has been used for creating the web page. Because we are working only in English, so ASCII encoding is sufficient. But if you are working with some international languages, had you been living in some other country where they use some other language like Japanese or Chinese, so for that you would be needing some different encoding technique like Unicode, which includes all the languages of the world. So encoding info or any other info regarding any script which you are using. If you have used JavaScript inside your page, if you have used any CSS inside your page, so all this information and many more, there is a lot of information which is there about a web page. And if that information about the document is needed, head method is. Put method is used to send a document from server to client. Trace echoes the incoming request. Echoes means to print to show the incoming request. Connect is reserved. Option inquires about various available options. So when you actually work as a web developer, you will be working with these methods. So that is HTTP, that is communication between a client computer and the web server. Then you have remote login. What is remote login? You have a terminal at your place. This is the local computer and this is the remote computer. When you are connecting from the local to the remote computer, that means remote login. Okay. Some feature of it is used in Microsoft Teams also. That is, if you want, you can easily, just I'll wrap up. You can easily connect to my computer and you can, like in the beginning when we used to work with data structures, if you remember, I had asked Pradyum to make some changes in the code, so he was able to connect, he was able to make changes on my desktop. So that was also one element of remote login which was given. So permits the user who is using one computer to log into remote computer or interact with a program or another computer. Students, I'll just take a few 10 minutes more. Okay, just I'll complete this. Command given at remote location is processed by the server. Result displayed over remote location. Then next is Telnet. It is also a protocol which is actually used for getting connected with a remote user. So it is an abbreviation for terminal network. It is the standard TCP/IP protocol for virtual terminal service as proposed by ISO, International Organization for Standards. Telnet enables the establishment of a connection to a remote system in such a way that local terminal appears to be a terminal at the remote system. You have a Telnet client, that is your computer, and you have a Telnet user ID and password, that is Telnet account, which is placed on a server. And using any Telnet application, you can easily log in into that Telnet server using some proper login credentials, username and password, and you can work on that. So it's a general purpose client server application program, and initially it was designed at a time when most operating systems were operating in a time sharing environment. In such an environment, a large computer supports multiple users. So it is almost a kind of an obsolete thing. We don't use Telnet much because normally or most of the task is through command, through by means of character user interface, that is CUI based commands, and hence it's not easy to remember the commands. We have better GUI based applications for connecting to a remote computer. So these are it. And in a time sharing environment, users are part of the system with some right to access resources. So all these things are there. You don't need to study all the things. With this, we almost complete our syllabus also. And few things in society, law and ethics, I'll be giving you notes. Please do study, use those notes and study from those notes. Very basic things are there. There is nothing to teach something like this. So please just go through those notes and it will be done. Okay. Thank you all. I
Thank you,
take your
ma'am.
leave over here. I hope you understood the class. And I'm uploading all these lectures. Do watch those lectures because your exams are drawing near, right? Thank you and see you all again in the next